The afternoon light had begun its slow descent, casting long golden threads across the surface of the lake. The water lay still like a sheet of silk that had been carefully smoothed and left to rest. There was no wind to speak of, only the smallest breath of air that occasionally stirred, so gentle it could barely be felt against the skin. The sailboat rocked ever so slightly at its mooring, an old wooden vessel with weathered planks that had hardened with age and water. The wood was smooth beneath the touch, worn down by countless hands over countless seasons. The boat was small, perhaps 20 feet from bow to stern, with a single mast that rose up towards the pale blue sky. The sails were furled, tied neatly with lengths of soft rope, waiting. He stood on the wooden dock, one hand resting lightly on the mooring post. The dock was old too, its boards silvered by sun and time, warm now from the day's heat. Small wavelets lapped against the pilings with the softest sound, a rhythmic whisper that came and went, came and went. The sound was like breathing. He wore simple clothes, canvas trousers and a loose cotton shirt that moved slightly when the air stirred. His feet were bare, and the wood of the dock was warm and smooth beneath them. There was no hurry. There was nowhere else to be. The evening stretched before him long and peaceful, full of quiet light. He stepped down onto the boat, placing each foot carefully, feeling the gentle give as the vessel responded to his weight. The boat settled, rocking just a little, finding its balance. He stood for a moment, letting his body adjust to the movement that slow back and forth, the ancient rhythm of floating things. The floorboards of the cockpit were clean, worn smooth by weather and use. He bent down, running his hand along the wood, checking as he always did, though he knew everything would be as it should be. The boat was well cared for, loved even, in the quiet way one loves familiar things that serve their purpose faithfully. He moved forward slowly, one hand trailing along the side of the boat for balance. There was a small rope coiled near the mast, and he picked it up, feeling the texture of it, the individual fibres that had been twisted together long ago. The rope was soft from use, pliable. He examined it for any signs of wear, looking at each section with patient attention. It was sound. He coiled it again carefully, each loop the same size, and set it back in its place. The mooring line needed to be checked next. He moved to the bow where the rope was secured to a cleat. The knot was simple, practical, tied many times before in exactly the same way. He worked it loose slowly, feeling the rope slide through the cleat, hearing the soft whisper of fibre against the wood. The line came free, and he held it loosely in his hand, feeling the weight of it. The boat began to drift, almost imperceptibly, away from the dock. There was no rush. He made his way back to the cockpit, stepping carefully, aware of every movement. The rope trailed in the water behind the boat, making the tiniest ripple, a V shape that spread out and gradually disappeared into the stillness of the lake. He sat down on the wooden bench that ran along one side of the cockpit. The wood was sun-warmed, comfortable, He pulled the mooring line hand over hand, slowly, feeling the water drip from it. The drops fell back into the lake with small plinking sounds, soft notes in the quiet evening. He coiled the wet rope loosely and set it aside where it could dry. The boat continued to drift, moving away from the dock on the slightest of currents. There was no sound except the water against the hull, a gentle murmuring, and somewhere far across the lake, the distant call of a bird. The call came once, then silence returned. He looked out across the water. The lake was large, stretching away in all directions, surrounded by low hills covered in trees. The trees were dark green in the fading light, their reflections perfect in the still water, as if there were two worlds, one above and one below, meeting at an invisible seam. The sun was lower now, no longer overhead, but settling towards the western hills. The light had changed, becoming softer, warmer, taking on a golden quality that made everything glow. The surface of the lake caught this light and held it shimmering gently. He stood and moved to the mast. The sails needed to be raised, but there was no hurry. He untied the first knot that held the mainsail furled, working the rope through his fingers until it came free. The sail remained in place, held by several other ties. He moved to the next one, working patiently, his fingers knowing exactly what to do. Each knot was the same, tied in the same way each time the sail was lowered, and now untied with the same careful attention. The rope was smooth between his fingers. He worked slowly, methodically, untying one knot, then another, moving along the boom which held the bottom edge of the sail. When the last tie was undone, he gathered the rope that would raise the sail. It ran through a series of blocks attached to the mast, simple wooden pulleys that turned with a soft creaking sound. He began to pull, hand over hand, and the sail started to rise. The canvas was old, patched in places, a colour somewhere between cream and pale tan. It rose slowly, unfolding as it went up, revealing its full shape. The halyard ran through his hands with a satisfying smoothness, and he pulled steadily, watching the sail climb the mast. When it was nearly at the top, he secured the line, wrapping it around a cleat in a figure-8 pattern, then slipping the end through to lock it in place. The sail hung loose, not yet catching any wind, swaying slightly with the boat's gentle motion. He moved next to the jib, the smaller sail at the front of the boat. The process was the same, untying the furling lines, gathering the halyard, pulling steadily. The jib rose up the forestay, the wire that ran from the bow to the top of the mast, climbing until it too was fully raised and secured. The sails hung slack now, moving slightly, waiting for wind that had not yet come. The boat continued to drift on the lake's subtle current, moving slowly away from shore toward the centre of the broad water. He sat down again on the bench, his hands resting slightly on the tiller. The tiller was smooth, wood, shaped to fit a hand, warm from the sun. He held it gently, not steering just yet, but just feeling the connection between his hand and the rudder below, sensing the water's movement through that simple wooden arm. The evening was absolutely still. The lake lay peaceful in all directions, its surface broken only by the boat's slow passage and the gentle ripples that spread from the hull. The light continued to soften, to warm, as the sun descended toward the hills. He could see the shoreline all around, a dark line of trees and occasional clearings. Here and there, a small dock extended into the water, or a cottage sat amongst the trees. But everything was distant, separate, quiet. There were no other boats on the water. The lake was his alone for the evening. The first breath of wind came so gently he almost didn't notice it. Just the slightest touch against his cheek, cool and soft. The sails stirred, rippling slightly, and then hung still again. He waited, patient, his hand steady on the tiller. Another breath of air, a little stronger this time. The sails moved, filling just slightly, not enough to move the boat, but enough to show that the wind was coming. He adjusted the tiller, pointing the bow slightly to the left, towards the centre of the lake, towards the open water where the wind would be. The jib filled first, catching the gentle breeze curving outward from the forestay. The canvas made a soft sound as it took the wind, a quiet snapping, and then it held full and round. The boat began to move very slowly, responding to the push of air against fabric. He released the main sheet, the rope that controlled the angle of the mainsail, letting it slide through his hand until the sail was out at the right position. The mainsail filled too, curving beautifully, and the boat settled into motion, gliding forward across the glassy water. The movement was so gentle it was almost imperceptible, just a smooth, gliding sensation, the water sliding along the hull with the softest whisper. He could feel it through the tiller, that subtle pressure, that connection to the water and the wind. The boat was alive beneath him, responding to the lightest touch. He adjusted the tiller slightly, steering towards the middle of the lake. The bow pointed straight and true, cutting through the still water, leaving a tiny wake that spread out behind in a perfect V, the lines meeting at the stern and extending back, 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 until they faded the general smoothness of the lake. The wind remained light, steady, coming from behind and slightly to the right. It was perfect wind for a peaceful evening sail, enough to move the boat, but not enough to create urgency or effort. He could feel it on his face, cool and fresh, carrying the scent of water and distant trees. The sun was lower still, touching the tops of the western hills now. The light had become even more golden, almost amber, painting everything with warm colour. The water ahead glowed, reflecting the sky, and the boat moved through this golden path, leaving its gentle wake behind. He breathed deeply, slowly, tasting the evening air. There was nothing else he needed to do, nowhere else he needed to be. The boat sailed itself, steady and true, requiring only the slightest touch on the tiller. He could feel his body relaxing, settling into the rhythm of the boat's motion, the slow rise and fall, that gentle forward glide. A bird flew past, low over the water, its wings making soft sounds with each stroke. He watched it go, following its path until it disappeared around a distant point of land. Then there was just the lake again, the sky, the golden light. The evening unfolded slowly, each moment long and peaceful, flowing into the next without urgency. The boat continued across the water, the sails full and steady, the wind gentle and constant. Time seemed to slow, to stretch, to become something different out here on the quiet lake. He looked up at the sails, watching how they curved, how they held the wind. The light came through the old canvas, glowing, making the sail seem almost luminous. The patches were visible, darker areas where repairs had been made over the years, each one a small story of care and maintenance, of attention paid to keeping this simple boat sailing. The boom creaked softly as the sail adjusted itself to a slight shift in the wind. It was a comfortable sound, familiar, the sound of wood working, of things settling into their proper place. The rigging made small sounds too, the wire forestay humming very quietly, the halyards tapping gently against the mast in rhythm with the boat's motion. He shifted slightly on the bench, finding a more comfortable position, his hand still light on the tiller. The wood of the bench was smooth, worn to a perfect finish by countless hours of sitting, of sailing, of peaceful evenings like this one. His bare feet rested on the floorboards, feeling the slight vibration of the boat moving through the water. The shoreline was farther away now, distant enough that the details were lost. Just the dark line of the trees, the shape of the hills, the gentle curves of the landscape. He was well out on the lake now, surrounded by water, held up by it, carried by it, part of it. The wind remained steady, that perfect evening breeze, cool but not cold, gentle but constant. The boat maintained its course, tracking straight across the centre of the lake. He made small adjustments to the tiller, tiny movements that kept the bow pointed where he wanted it. But these adjustments were almost unconscious now, his body and the boat in conversation, understanding each other without words. The sun touched the hilltops, began to sink behind them. The light changed again, becoming deeper, richer, the gold taking on hints of orange and amber. Shadows lengthened across the water, though the lake itself remained bright, catching and holding the last strong light of the day. He watched the water ahead, the way it moved, the tiny patterns on its surface. Where the light struck directly, it was almost too bright to look at, a dazzling golden shimmer. Away from the direct light, the water was darker, a deep blue-green that seemed to have depth, as if he could see down into it forever. Small insects appeared flying low over the water, their wings catching the light. They moved in erratic patterns, rising and falling, dancing in the warm air. A fish rose somewhere off to the left, its mouth breaking the surface with a small plop, taking an insect, then disappearing back into the depths. The ripples spread out in perfect circles, growing larger, fainter, until they merged with the general texture of the water. The boat sailed on, steady and true, the wind filling the sails, the water sliding past. He could hear it, that quiet sound of water moving along the hull, a soft rushing, almost like breathing in and out, constant and peaceful. He took another deep breath, feeling his chest expand, feeling the cool evening air fill his lungs. He held it for a moment, then released it slowly, letting all tension flow out with the exhale. His shoulders dropped, his grip on the tiller relaxed even more. There was nothing to hold on to, nothing to grasp. Just this moment, this gentle sailing, this peaceful evening. The light continued to fade slowly, gradually, the sun sinking further behind the hills. The gold became deeper, warmer, taking on more orange, more red. The sky above, still bright blue, but lower near the horizon, colours were appearing, soft pastel shades that blended into one another without clear boundaries. The boat's shadow stretched out across the water now, long and dark, the mast's shadow extending even further, pointing east, away from the setting sun. He watched this shadow move across the water, watched it ripple slightly over the small waves, watched it stretch and compress as the boat rose and fell on the lake's gentle surface. Everything was peaceful. Everything was still. The world had narrowed to this moment, this boat, this lake, this evening. There was nothing else, and that was exactly right. That was exactly enough. The sun was half hidden now behind the western hills, a brilliant semicircle of orange-red that seemed to pulse with warmth. The colours in the sky had deepened, layers of peach and coral, soft pink and pale lavender, all blending together in the endless space above the lake. He adjusted his position slightly, leaning back against the side of the cockpit, his hand still resting on the tiller but barely guiding it now. The boat knew where it was going, sailing itself across the quiet water. The wind had not changed, that same gentle push from behind, steady and reliable, asking nothing and giving everything. The water had taken on the colours of the sky, reflecting the warm hues, becoming a mirror for the sunset. Where the light struck most directly, it was a brilliant orange path leading back towards the sun, a glowing road across the water. On either side, the lake was darker, holding the deeper blues and purples of the approaching evening. He could feel the temperature beginning to drop, that subtle shift that comes as day moves towards night. The air had been warm all afternoon, but now it was cooling, becoming fresher, carrying different scents. He breathed in, tasting the dampness that rose from the water, the earthy smell of the distant shore, and the clean emptiness of open space. The sails made soft sounds, small adjustments as they held the wind. The canvas moved slightly, settling, finding the perfect angle. The boat responded, its motion smooth and continuous, that gentle gliding that required no effort, no thought, just acceptance of the wind's gift. He looked towards the eastern shore where shadows had already gathered, where the hills were dark against the lighter sky. The trees were silhouettes now, black shapes without detail, solid and still. Here and there a light appeared in a cottage window, a small yellow glow that seemed impossibly far away, impossibly small in the gathering dusk. The water near the eastern shore was darker too, mysterious, deep. It held secrets, that dark water, ancient things, quiet things that lived far below the surface. But here, where he sailed, the water was still bright, still catching the last strong rays of the sun, still glowing with borrowed light. A nighthawk appeared, flying high above, making its unusual call, a nasal peent that echoed across the water. He watched it circle, watched it dive suddenly, plummeting down and rushing sound as air rushed through its feathers, then pulling up again, rising back into the sky. It was hunting insects, celebrating the evening in its own way, wild and free. The boat's bow lifted slightly on a gentle swell, then settled back down, the motion slow and easy. Water rushed softly along the hull, that constant companion sound, never silent, never loud, just present, always there, like the breathing of a sleeping companion. He shifted the tiller slightly, turning the bow a few degrees to the left, heading more directly towards the middle of the lake, towards the deepest water. The boat responded immediately, turning in a slow arc, the sails adjusting themselves, the whole vessel moving as one piece, graceful and sure. The sun was 3/4 hidden now, just a bright arc visible above the hills. The light was fading, but not yet gone, that long, lingering twilight of summer evenings when the day seems reluctant to leave, when the light holds on and on, gradually softening but never quite disappearing. He could see his hands on the tiller, tan from days in the sun, lined with the small scars and marks of a life lived outdoors, of work done with tools and rope and wood. They were strong hands, but gentle now, holding the tiller as one might hold something precious and fragile, with care and attention. His breathing had slowed, matching the rhythm of the boat, the rhythm of the evening. Each breath came deep and easy, filling his lungs, then releasing slowly, naturally. There was no effort in it, no thought, just the simple act of breathing, of being alive, of being here on this quiet lake as day faded into night. The wake behind the boat was visible in the low light, 2 lines of disturbed water that caught the remaining sunlight, gleaming, marking the boat's passage across the lake. The lines were perfectly straight, perfectly parallel, evidence of the boat's steady course, its true tracking. He looked up at the sky again, watching the colours change. The orange was deepening to red, the pink becoming purple, the blue overhead darkening towards indigo. Stars would come soon, first 1 or 2, then dozens, then hundreds, filling the sky with their ancient light. But not yet, not quite yet. The wind shifted slightly, coming now from directly behind. He adjusted the tiller, letting the boat turn a bit to catch this new angle, and the sails settled into a new position, still full, still drawing well. The boat's speed remained the same, that gentle forward gliding, unhurried and peaceful. Small waves began to appear on the water's surface, tiny ripples that caught the light, making the lake sparkle. They were barely visible, just suggestions of movement, the water's way of showing that it was alive, that it moved and breathed and changed. even while appearing perfectly still from a distance. A bat appeared, swooping low over the water, its flight erratic and quick, so different from the boat's steady progress. It darted here and there, hunting insects, its wings making no sound that he could hear. It passed close enough that he could see its small body, its leathery wings, and then it was gone, disappeared into the gathering dusk. He reached forward slowly and adjusted the main sheet slightly, pulling it in just an inch or two, trimming the sail for maximum efficiency. The sail responded, tightening, drawing a bit better. The boat's speed increased, almost imperceptibly, but he could feel it, that slightly stronger sensation of water moving past, of forward progress. The sun was nearly gone now, just a slither of bright colour above the hills, like a door closing slowly on a bright room. The sky blazed with colour, the horizon a band of intense orange and red that faded upward into pink, purple, blue, indigo, all the colours of twilight displayed in a perfect graduation. He watched this display with quiet appreciation, seeing it and yet not seeing it, aware of its beauty but not trying to hold on to it, knowing that it would fade, that the colours would dim, that night would come. Everything in its time, everything in its season. The water around the boat was darker now, reflecting less light, becoming a deeper colour, mysterious and peaceful. He could no longer see clearly into the depths. The water had become opaque, holding its secrets, showing only its surface, which reflected the sky's fading colours in softer, muted tones. The wind remained steady, that faithful evening breeze, carrying the boat across the darkening water. The air was cooler now, noticeably so, and he felt it on his arms, his face, bringing a slight chill that was not unpleasant, just different, a reminder of the day's end. He looked at the mast, tall and straight, rising up into the dimming sky. The forestay caught a bit of remaining light, gleaming like a silver thread. The rigging was dark against the sky, a precise geometry of lines and angles, functional and simple, and beautiful in its utility. The last silver of sun disappeared behind the hills. The last slither of sun disappeared behind the hills. The immediate brightness left the sky, though light remained, a diffuse glow that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, the light of twilight, neither day nor night, but something between, a threshold time, a time of transition. The colours in the sky began to soften, to fade, the intense oranges and reds giving way to deeper purples and blues, the pink becoming lavender, the lavender becoming violet, the violet darkened towards the blue-black of approaching night. Stars appeared, first one in the east, a bright point in the darkening sky, then another, then several more, scattered across the heavens. The boat sailed on through this changing light, steady and true, the wind still filling the sails and water still sliding past. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had changed. Day was ending, night was beginning. The lake held both, reflected both, mirrored both the fading light and the first stars. He could see the shoreline all around now as a darker mass, a solid presence against the sky. Details were lost, everything simplified to shapes and silhouettes. A tree-covered hill, a point of land jutting out into the water, the curve of a distant bay, all visible but without detail, reduced to their essential forms. The water had become dark too, no longer reflecting much light, just holding the last faint glow of the sky. The boat's wake was invisible now, lost in the general darkness of the water. He knew it was there, knew the boat was still moving, still leaving its mark on the water, but he could no longer see it. The wind began to ease slightly, losing some of its strength as the day ended. This was normal. The wind often died at sunset, then picked up again later as the land cooled and the air began to move. He felt the sails lose some of their fullness, saw them ripple slightly, and the boat's forward motion slowed just a bit. He didn't adjust anything and didn't try to compensate. He simply let it happen, let the boat respond to the changing conditions, let everything unfold as it would. There was no hurry. There was nowhere to be. The boat would sail as long as there was wind, and when there was no wind, it would drift, and that would be fine too. More stars appeared, dozens now, scattered across the darkening sky. The brighter ones showed first, the familiar stars, the ones he knew by name and position. He picked out several, following their patterns, seeing the connections that ancient people had seen, the shapes they had named and remembered. The sky in the west was still lighter than the east, a band of pale blue-green that marked where the sun had set, but even this was fading, growing dimmer by the moment. The night was coming on steadily, inevitably, without pause or hesitation. The boat's motion remained smooth, gentle, that slow forward glide that was barely perceptible now in the darkness. He could feel it more than see it, sense the boat's passage through the water by slight pressure on the tiller, the subtle movement beneath his feet, the soft sounds of water against the hull. The lake was quiet now, deeply quiet, the kind of quiet that seems to have depth and texture, the kind of quiet that fills the space between the sounds. He could hear his own breathing, slow and steady. He could hear the water, the soft rushing along the hull. He could hear the wind, gentle in the rigging. But beyond these small sounds, there was silence, vast and peaceful. He closed his eyes for a moment, just feeling, not seeing. The boat moved beneath him. The tiller was warm and smooth in his hand. The air moved gently against his skin. He could feel everything, sense everything, without needing to see. The boat, the water, the wind, the night, all present, all real, all connected. When he opened his eyes again, the darkness had deepened further. The stars were brighter now, more numerous, filling the sky with their patient light. The Milky Way was beginning to show, a faint band of light across the heavens, countless stars, too distant to see individually, blending together in a soft glow. The moon had not yet risen. It would come later, he knew, bringing its silver light changing everything again. But for now, there was only starlight, and that was enough. That was more than enough. The wind steadied again, finding a new equilibrium, and the boat resumed its gentle progress across the dark water. He could barely see the sails now, just dark shapes against the slightly lighter sky, but he could feel them working, feel the boat responding, feel the connection between wind and sail and boat and water. A loon called somewhere far across the lake, its haunting cry echoing across the water, rising and falling, wild and lonely and beautiful. The sound seemed to carry forever, touching the distant shores, rolling across the water, filling the night with ancient voice. Then it faded, and the silence returned deeper than before. He felt completely at peace, completely present, completely here. There was nothing to do, nothing to think about, nothing to plan or worry over. Just this moment, this boat, this lake, this night. Just the gentle forward motion, the soft sounds of sailing, the cool air on his skin. The boat continued across the dark water, barely visible now, just a small shape moving through the vastness of the night, carried by the wind, held up by the water, guided by a gentle hand on the tiller. Time had become something different, something slower, something almost irrelevant. There was only the present, only now, only this eternal moment of peaceful sailing. The stars watched from above, patient and distant. The water supported from below, dark and deep and constant. The wind pushed from behind, gentle and faithful, and the boat sailed on peacefully, quietly, into the deepening night. The darkness had settled now, complete and soft, wrapping around the boat like a blanket. The stars shone steadily overhead, their light cold and distant, but beautiful, each point of light a sun impossibly far away, burning with the same fire as the sun that had set behind the western hills. He sat quietly in the cockpit, his hand resting lightly on the tiller, feeling the boat's motion through that simple connection of wood and water. The wind had steadied, neither strengthening nor weakening, just present, constant, pushing the boat gently across the dark lake. The air had grown cooler, definitely cooler now, with the chill that comes after sunset when the earth begins to release the day's stored heat. He could feel it on his arms, his face, a refreshing coolness that made him breathe more deeply, more deliberately. The air tasted clean, empty of everything except its own freshness. The boat's passage through the water was almost silent now. The rushing sound was still there, but quieter, softer, a gentle whisper rather than a clear voice. The water was smooth, barely disturbed by small waves, and the boat slipped through it like a hand through silk, leaving almost no mark, almost no trace. He looked up at the sky, at the countless stars scattered across it. There were so many, more than he could ever count, more than could ever be named. Some were arranged in patterns he recognized, constellations that sailors had used for guidance since humans first ventured onto water. Others were scattered randomly, beautiful in their chaos, their unpredictable distribution across the black expanse. The Milky Way was clearer now, a broad band of light stretching from horizon to horizon, a river of stars flowing through the darkness. He could see variations in its brightness, areas where stars clustered more thickly, darker lanes where dust blocked the light of stars beyond. It was ancient light he was seeing, light that had travelled for years, for centuries, to reach his eyes on this quiet evening. A slight change in the boat's motion drew his attention back to the water. The wind had shifted, just a few degrees, coming now from slightly to the right instead of directly behind. He adjusted the tiller, a small movement, and the boat responded, turning gently, finding the new angle that would let the sails draw best. The darkness was complete, but not empty. His eyes had adjusted now, and he could see more than he had at first. The water had its own faint luminescence, a barely perceptible glow that came from he knew not where. Perhaps it was starlight reflecting off the surface, or perhaps it was something in the water itself, tiny living things that glowed with their own cold light. The horizon line was invisible, the dark water merging seamlessly with the dark sky. Only the stars marked where sky began, their presence defining the space above. Without them, there would have been no way to tell water from sky, earth from heaven. Everything would have been one vast darkness, undifferentiated and complete. But the stars were there, patient and eternal, and they gave shape to the night, gave structure to the darkness. He found comfort in them, in their steadiness, in the way they had always been there and would always be there, long after this night had ended, long after this life had ended. The boat continued its gentle progress across the lake. He had no clear destination, no particular place he was trying to reach. The sailing itself was the purpose, the being there, the moving through this darkness with only the wind and stars for company. That was enough. That was everything. His breathing had slowed even further, each breath deep and full, filling his lungs completely, then releasing slowly, naturally. He could feel his heartbeat steady and calm, pumping blood through his body, keeping him alive, keeping him present in this moment. It was a good feeling, being aware of his own life, his own existence, without drama or crisis, just the simple fact of being alive. The sails made small sounds, gentle creaks and rustles as the fabric moved slightly, adjusting to the wind. The boom shifted just a bit, the wood creaking softly where the fittings held it to the mast. These were comfortable sounds, familiar sounds, the sounds of a boat in motion, doing what boats had done for thousands of years. He could smell the water now, a clean scent, mineral and fresh, the smell of lake water in summer. It mixed with the smell of old wood from the boat, a dry, warm scent that spoke of sun and time. And underneath, very faint, the smell of canvas from the sails, a slightly dusty smell, the smell of woven fabric that had been wet and dried many times. The darkness seemed to have texture, seemed to have depth. It was not just an absence of light, but a presence in itself, a thing that filled the space around the boat, that wrapped around him, that held him gently. It was not threatening, this darkness. It was protective, comforting, a natural part of the cycle of day and night. Far across the lake he could see a few lights on the shore, small yellow points that marked cottages and houses where people were settling in for the evening, turning on lamps, drawing curtains, moving through their familiar routines. The lights were distant, separated from him by wide expanses of dark water, and they seemed to belong to a different world, a world of walls and roofs and artificial light. Out here on the lake there were no walls, no roof except the sky, no light except what the stars provided. It was a different kind of space, open and boundless, free from the structures that defined daily life on land. He felt that freedom, felt it in his body, in the way he could breathe more deeply, could think more clearly, could simply be without the constraints of buildings and schedules and expectations. The wind continued steady, that faithful presence pushing the boat gently but firmly across the water. The sails were dark shapes above him, visible against the stars, their curves graceful and functional. They did their work silently, without complaint, converting the invisible force of wind into visible motion, into the boat's progress across the lake. He shifted his position slightly, stretching his legs out, finding a more comfortable way to sit. The wooden bench was hard, but not uncomfortable, worn smooth by years of use. His back rested against the side of the cockpit, supported, stable. He could sit here for hours, had sat here for hours many times before, watching the sky, feeling the boat's motion, being present in the quiet darkness. Time passed, unmeasured and unmeasurable. There was no way to tell how long he had been sailing, no way to know how much longer he would sail. The darkness made time irrelevant, made it something that flowed rather than ticked, something that moved like water rather than marching like a clock. Then in the east, a change, a lightening of darkness, a glow that had not been there before. The moon was rising, still below the horizon, but close enough now that its light was beginning to show, beginning to push back against the darkness. He watched this glow, watched it strengthen, watched it spread along the eastern horizon. The stars near the horizon began to fade slightly, washed out by the coming moonlight. The darkness itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting. And then the moon appeared, first just a slither, a curve of brilliant silver at the horizon, then more, rising slowly, majestically, a perfect half moon climbing into the sky. Its light was immediate and transformative, silvering the water, making the night visible in a new way. The dark water became silver, reflective, showing the moon's path across its surface. The boat became visible, its white hull gleaming softly, its sails pale shapes catching the moonlight. The rigging showed as delicate lines against the sky, precise and beautiful. He could see his hands now, see the tiller, see the floorboards of the cockpit. Everything was transformed by this silver light, made magical, made mysterious. The colours were gone, everything rendered in shades of silver and black. But it was beautiful, perhaps even more beautiful than in daylight. The moon rose higher, pulling free of the horizon, becoming a full presence in the sky. It was a half moon, perfectly balanced between darkness and light, showing its craters and mountains in sharp relief, its face ancient and familiar and strange all at once. The lake stretched out in all directions, visible now, a vast expanse of silver water under the moonlight. He could see the darker masses of the shoreline, the silhouettes of hills and trees, the overall shape of the landscape, but details were still lost. Everything simplified, reduced to essential forms by the moon's clear light. The boat's wake was visible again, 2 lines of disturbed water that glowed silver in the moonlight, trailing back behind the boat, marking its passage across the lake. The lines were straight and true, evidence of the steady course he'd been holding, the careful attention he'd paid to the tiller. The wind had not changed with the moon's rising. It continued steady, the same gentle push from the right rear, filling the sails, moving the boat forward. But everything felt different in the moonlight, less mysterious perhaps, but more magical, more dreamlike. He could see the water's surface now, see the small ripples that moved across it, see the way the moonlight sparkled on these tiny waves. Each ripple caught the light, held it for a moment, then released it as the next ripple came. The water was alive with light, dancing, moving, never still. A fish jumped somewhere off to the left, breaking the surface with a small splash, as its body silver in the moonlight for just an instant before it disappeared back into the water. The ripples spread out from where it had been, circles expanding, growing fainter until they merged with the general texture of the water. The moon continued to climb, pulling away from the horizon, rising higher into the sky. Its light grew stronger, clearer, illuminating more of the world, pushing the darkness back to the edges of vision. Stars faded near the moon, overwhelmed by its brightness, but away from it they still shone steadily, patient points of light in the silver sky. He adjusted the main sheet slightly, trimming the sail to account for a small shift in the wind. The sail tightened, drew better, and the boat's motion became just a bit smoother, just a bit more efficient. He could see what he was doing now, could see the rope in his hand, the cleat where he secured it, the way the sail responded to the adjustment. The moonlight made everything easier, but he found he missed something about the complete darkness, the way it had forced him to feel rather than to see, to sense rather than observe. The darkness had required a different kind of attention, a different kind of awareness. The moonlight was beautiful, but it was also easier, less demanding, less intimate somehow. Still, he was grateful for it, for the way it illuminated the boat and the water, for the way it made the night visible. The moon was a companion now, sailing with him, lighting his way across the quiet lake. He looked up at it, at the clear details of its surface, the familiar patterns of dark and light that made up its face. The ancient peoples had seen many things in those patterns: a face, a rabbit, a toad. He saw just the moon, just the satellite that circled Earth, reflecting the sun's light back onto the night side of the world. Beautiful, undeniably beautiful, hanging there in the black sky, surrounded by stars, bathing everything in its cool silver light. It asked nothing, offered everything, a gift of light in the darkness. The boat continued across the moonlit water, its sails full, its course steady. The wind remained faithful, the water remained calm, the night remained peaceful. Everything was exactly as it should be, exactly as it needed to be. He breathed deeply, tasting the cool air, feeling it fill his lungs. The moonlight made the air seem different, cleaner somehow, more pure. Or perhaps it was just the lateness of the hour, the way the night air always felt fresher, cooler, more alive than the air of the day. His body had settled completely into the rhythm of the boat, his muscles relaxed, his posture easy and natural. He was part of the boat now, an extension of it, moving with it, feeling what it felt, responding to what it responded to. There was no separation between sailor and vessel, between person and boat. They were one thing, moving through the water together. The hours passed slowly, measured only by the moon's progress across the sky, by the slow turning of the stars. He sailed on, content, peaceful, asking nothing more from the evening than what it was already giving him, this quiet time, this gentle motion, this perfect solitude. The lake stretched out in all directions, vast and calm, reflecting the moon, holding the boat, supporting and carrying it through the silver night. The wind blew steadily, never too strong, never too weak, just right for the peaceful sailing. And the boat responded, moving forward, cutting through the water, leaving its gentle wake, carrying him deeper into the night. The moon had risen well above the horizon now, climbing steadily through the starlit sky, illuminating the night with its gentle silver light. The boat continued its peaceful progress across the lake, moving with the same unhurried grace it had maintained throughout the evening. He sat in the cockpit, his hand resting lightly on the tiller, his body completely relaxed, at ease with the motion of the boat, the coolness of the night, the solitude of the water. There was nowhere else he wanted to be, nothing else he wanted to do. This moment was complete in itself. The wind had remained steady all evening, that faithful breeze that had carried him across the lake without pause, without variation. It was a gift, such wind, reliable and gentle, asking nothing, giving everything. He felt grateful for it, grateful for the way it filled the sails, grateful for the way it moved the boat forward through the moonlit water. The lake was calm, its surface smooth, except for the smallest ripples, the gentle texture of water responding to air. The moonlight danced on these ripples, creating a path of silver that led from the moon itself down the water, a glowing road that seemed to stretch forever. His eyes had fully adjusted to the moonlight now, and he could see clearly, though everything was rendered in that silvery monochrome that moonlight creates. The boat was clearly visible, every detail sharp and present. The coiled ropes, the wooden cleats, the smooth planks of the deck, all there, all real, all beautiful in their simple functionality. He looked at the sails above, watching how they held the wind, how they curved perfectly, translating the invisible pressure of air into visible motion. The moonlight shone through the old canvas in places, making it seem luminous, almost transparent. The patches were darker areas, solid and opaque, but somehow they added to the beauty rather than detracting from it. Evidence of care, evidence of maintenance, of attention paid over years. The mast rose straight and true, a dark line against the star-filled sky. At its top, the rigging attached and spread out, lines running down to various points on the boat, a web of support and control. It was simple but elegant, this rigging, nothing more than what was needed, nothing less. Far ahead he could see the dark shape of the shoreline, closer now than it had been. He had sailed across much of the lake during the evening, covering distance without hurry, arriving without urgency. The shore marked the far side of the lake, where trees grew down to the water's edge, where the land rose up into hills. He adjusted the tiller slightly, pointing the bow towards a small bay he could barely make out in the moonlight. It was a protected spot, he knew, a place where the water was calm, where the wind was blocked by the surrounding hills, a good place to anchor, to rest, to spend the remaining hours of darkness. The boat responded to the tiller, turning gently, the sails adjusting themselves to the new angle. The wind remained steady, still filling the canvas, still pushing the boat forward. The motion was so smooth, so gentle, that the turn was barely perceptible. Just a gradual change of direction, the bow swinging slowly, point towards the bay. As he sailed closer to the shore, he could see more details. Individual trees became visible, their shapes distinct against the lighter sky. A small dock extended out into the water, dark and still. A cottage sat back from the shore, no lights visible in its windows, everyone asleep, or perhaps no one there at all. The bay opened before him, a dark inlet protected on three sides by land. The water here was even calmer, barely moving, reflecting the moon like a perfect mirror. He sailed into this calm water slowly, feeling the wind begin to die as the land blocked its flow. The sails began to flapping slightly as they lost the wind. He released the main sheet, letting the boom swing out, spilling the remaining air from the sail. The boat's forward motion slowed, then stopped, and the boat sat still on the calm water, rocking gently, settling into this new stillness. He moved forward carefully, stepping along the side deck, one hand on the mast for balance. At the bow, he picked up the anchor, a simple metal hook attached to a length of chain and rope. The metal was cool in his hands, solid and heavy, reliable. He lowered the anchor over the side slowly, letting the chain slide through his hands link by link. It made soft clinking sounds as it went down, disappearing into the dark water. When he felt it touched bottom, he let out more rope, enough to ensure the anchor would hold, enough to keep the boat from drifting. He secured the anchor line to the bow cleat, tying it with a simple knot, checking to make sure it was firm. The boat swung slowly on the anchor, turning to face the slight current that flowed through the bay, finding its natural position. Making his way back to the cockpit, he began the process of lowering the sails. The mainsail first, releasing the halyard, letting the rope slide through his hands as the sail came down. The canvas fell in gentle folds, draping over the boom. He gathered it loosely, not furling it completely, just settling it in place where it would rest for the night. The jib came down next, sliding down the forestay, crumpling at the base. He gathered it too, loosely, making sure it was secure, but not worrying about making everything perfectly neat. That would wait for morning. For now, it was enough that the sails were down, that the boat was secure, that everything was safe and at rest. The boat rocked gently on its anchor, responding to the small movements of the water. It was a different motion than sailing, more subtle, just a slight back and forth rocking, soothing and rhythmic. The sound of water against the hull was softer now, gentler, just small laps and gurgles as the boat moved on the calm surface. He sat down again in the cockpit, leaning back, looking up at the sky. The moon had climbed higher still, well above the hills now, smaller, seeming at this height, but no less bright. Stars surrounded it, countless points of light, the universe displaying itself in all its vastness. He felt very small under that sky, small and insignificant, and yet not diminished by it. Rather, he felt connected to it, part of it, a small piece of the same fabric that made up stars and moons and planets. He was made of the same elements, born from the same ancient processes, temporary but real, alive in this moment under this sky. Air had grown quiet and cool now, and he felt the chill on his skin, but it was not uncomfortable. It was refreshing, cleansing, the cool touch of night air. He breathed it deeply, filling his lungs, feeling the coolness spread through his body. The shore was close now, perhaps 50 feet away. He could hear sounds from the land, the soft rustle of leaves in the trees, the chirping of night insects, the occasional call of a night bird. These sounds were different from the sounds of the open lake, more intimate, more detailed, the sounds of life continuing in the darkness. A frog called from the shore, a deep rhythmic sound, answered by another frog somewhere farther away. The two called back and forth, communicating in their simple language, marking territory or seeking mates, continuing the ancient patterns of their kind. He closed his eyes for a moment, just listening, not thinking, just being present with the sounds of the night. The water lapping against the hull, the frogs calling, the insects chirping, the leaves rustling. All of it blended together in a symphony of night sounds, natural and peaceful. When he opened his eyes again, he felt a deep tiredness. Not the exhaustion of hard work, but the pleasant fatigue that comes from a day well spent, from hours outdoors, from peaceful activity. His body was ready for rest, ready for sleep. He moved slowly, gathering the cushions that were stored in a compartment under the bench. They were simple canvas cushions, filled with some kind of foam, weatherproof and comfortable. He arranged them on the floor, making a simple bed a place to lay down and rest. There was a blanket too, stored in the same compartment, an old wool blanket that smelled of salt and sun and storage. He pulled it out, shaking it gently, then laid it over the cushions. It would be enough, this simple bed, this open-air bedroom under the stars. He lay down on the cushions, pulling the blanket over himself, settling into this makeshift bed. The cushions were surprisingly comfortable, supporting his body, cradling him gently. He could feel the boat's motion through them, that gentle rocking on the calm water, like being in a cradle, like being rocked to sleep. The sky stretched above him, vast and clear, filled with stars. The moon shone down, bathing everything in silver light. He could see the mast pointing up towards the heavens, could see the rigging outlined against the stars, could see the dark shapes of the surrounding hills. He adjusted his position slightly, finding the most comfortable way to lie, his head resting on one of the cushions, his body relaxed under the blanket. The boat rocked gently, steadily, that ancient rhythm of floating things, of boats at anchor, of vessels at rest on calm water. His breathing slowed, deepened, became the breathing of approaching sleep. Each breath came long and full, filling his lungs completely, then releasing slowly, naturally. He could feel his heartbeat slowing too, settling into the rhythm of rest, of peace, of letting go. The sounds around him became softer, more distant, as if they were moving away, or he was moving away from them. The water lapping against the hull, the frogs calling, the insects chirping, all of it fading, becoming part of the general background, part of the fabric of the night. He felt the coolness of the air on his face, the warmth of the blanket over his body. He felt the gentle motion of the boat beneath him, that soothing rocking that seemed to match his breathing, his heartbeat, the rhythm of his very existence. He felt held, supported, cradled by the boat, by the water, by the night itself. His thoughts slowed, became less distinct, less formed. Images drifted through his mind, the setting sun, the darkening water, the rising moon, the star-filled sky. But they were gentle images, peaceful images, images without urgency or demand. The boat continued its gentle rocking, anchored securely, held in place by the weight of metal on the lake bottom, floating on the surface, suspended between water and air, between earth and sky. It was exactly where it needed to be, exactly where it belonged. He felt himself drifting, not in space, but in consciousness, moving slowly towards sleep, towards that gentle darkness that was not frightening, but welcoming, that place of rest and renewal. His body relaxed completely, releasing any remaining tension, surrendering to the tiredness, accepting the gift of sleep. The moon shone down, patient and eternal, lighting the night, keeping watch over the quiet lake, the anchored boat, the sleeping sailor. Its light touched everything with silver, the water, the boat, the hills, the trees, transforming the world into something magical and peaceful. The stars wheeled slowly overhead, following their ancient paths, marking time in the only way that mattered out here on the water, by their positions, their movements, their eternal dance across the heavens. They had shone before this night, would shine after it, their light travelling across vast distances to reach this small boat on this quiet lake. The wind had died completely now, the air still and cool. The water was like glass, barely moving, reflecting the moon and stars with perfect clarity. The boat sat motionless except for the gentlest rocking held by its anchor, floating peacefully. His breathing became even slower, deeper, the breathing of sleep. His consciousness faded, blending with the darkness, merging with the night. He was still aware in some distant way of the boat beneath him, the sky above him, the blanket over him. But these things were far away now, distant and dreamlike. The night held him gently, the boat held him gently, the water held them both gently. His breathing became even slower, deeper, the breathing of sleep. His consciousness faded, blending with the darkness, merging with the night. He was still aware, in some distant way, of the boat beneath him, the sky above him, the blanket over him. But these things were far away now, distant and dreamlike. The night held him gently. The boat held him gently. The water held them both gently. Everything was exactly as it should be, peaceful, calm, and still. There was nothing to worry about, nothing to fear, nothing to do. Just this rest, this sleep, this perfect surrender to the night. The moon continued its slow climb across the sky, lighting the world below with its borrowed light. The stars continued their slow wheel overhead, patient and eternal. The water continued its gentle lapping against the hull, the softest of sounds, the most peaceful of rhythms. And the sailor slept, deeply and peacefully rocked by the boat, watched over by the moon and stars, held by the water, embraced by the night. He was part of it all, connected to it all, one with the lake and the sky and the darkness and the light. The boat floated on the calm water, secure at its anchor, its sails furled, its mast pointing towards the heavens. It too seemed to rest, to sleep, to settle into the peace of the night. Wood and rope and canvas, shaped by human hands into a vessel for travel, now resting after its journey, peaceful and still. The bay was silent except for the small sounds of nature, the water moving gently, the frogs calling softly, the insects singing their quiet songs. These sounds were not disturbances, but part of the peace, part of the fabric of the night, threads woven into the larger tapestry of darkness and rest. Time passed, unmeasured and unimportant. Minutes or hours, it didn't matter. There was only the night, only the sleeping sailor, only the floating boat, only the calm water, and the watching moon and the patient stars. The world turned slowly on its axis, carrying the boat and the lake and the sleeping sailor with it, spinning through space, orbiting the sun, part of the vast dance of the universe. But here on this quiet lake, in this peaceful bay, there was only stillness, only rest, only the deep peace of a perfect night. And so he slept deeply and completely, his dreams quiet and gentle, filled with images of water and sky, of sailing and peace, of moonlight and stars. He slept as the boat rocked gently beneath him, as the water held him up, as the night embraced him with its cool darkness and silver light. He slept, and the world slept with him, or seemed to, everything quiet and still and peaceful. The night wrapped around everything like a soft blanket, holding all of it, boat and sailor, water and land, earth and sky, in its gentle embrace. And in this sleeping, in this rest, in this perfect peace, there was nothing more needed, nothing more wanted, nothing more required. Just this moment, this sleep, this deep and peaceful rest under the stars, on the water, in this night. The moon watched, the stars wheeled slowly, the water held the boat gently, and the sailor slept peacefully, deeply, completely at rest. The night continued patient and eternal, holding everything in its quiet darkness, in its silver light, in its perfect peace. And all was well. All was exactly as it should be. All was peace. All was rest. All was sleep.